the meeting started, just because I know everyone's time is precious. So thanks. This is Working Group 2.1, the user experience, and for DCI Network. So we want to talk about future design. And just to pick up the comment that we just started earlier about students using chatbots. As we're developing the conference panels for our AI conference, I definitely want to have one on chatbots because that's central to what we're doing here. But a related topic is educating the public about AI literacy. And I've had 2 or 3 people say, what are we doing in that? And they think it's really important. And, both educating the public, but probably also healthcare professionals on, the limitations or risks with that. And so an AI system that gets sassy all of a sudden is a potential issue. I was watching a demo yesterday and at Harvard Medical School, and they had a system that does differential diagnosis for cases. And it actually got a little sassy in one of the statements. It said something about, what was the joke? It's something about New England but it made some humorous anecdote, right? Ava, you were there. Remember that?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
And, some of those humorous things can be taken offensively, right? If you sort of make a joke of, oh, Northerners are like this or Southerners are like that, right? Or people can get pretty offensive. And so how we build a system that personalizes, but, doesn't make a offhanded joke or anecdote might be really important. But anyways, so this the literacy part, wanted to get your pulse on whether you think we should do that. I mean, I think we'll have to, for our chatbot, we'll have to have warnings to our users, but is this something that we want to do? Like one short term at the conference, talk about educating patients. Not even sure how we would reach. We'd have to develop the curriculum and have to figure out innovative ways. Maybe, it'll have to be through social media. I don't know, but how important is this topic, and is anyone doing stuff like that? Should we do it? What are your thoughts, short term for the conference and long term for?
So I think my concern from the patient perspective is trust. And we already have from COVID some lack of trust in the system. And so I think some people are looking outside the system for answers. So then the question becomes, are chatbots that answer that they're looking to? But I I keep coming back to, and we've talked about this before, just how do we instill trust both in the information, but also in the infrastructure? So who's building the chatbot? Where's the data go? Like all. So I do think some education is worthwhile. To what degree? I think as we consider who has access to chatbots, who knows how to use them, do we want to reach the people that don't have access and maybe are not as health literate? So those are my random thoughts this morning.
Isaac, what do you think?
Yeah, actually, I'm having conversations with the population health management team about the chatbot we're trying to deploy. And I think the main issue is they have to have so I feel like when we talk about chatbots, we have to be context specific, not only in terms of the task that it's going to be able to execute, but under what context is it going to answer questions? And because that will then determine how you can best engender trust with the system. So for example, in the group that we're hoping to deploy the chatbot, there already is like a patient navigator associated with this specific program. And so to have a chatbot deployed when they already have a patient navigator and also some contact with the health system and that they already trust, it allows them to interface with the chatbot a little bit more easily because they're like, okay, I think I can trust what this has to say or the questions that it's asking me. And it's not going to be misused or misrepresented in any way whatsoever. And so I think it really just depends on what you want the chatbot to do and under what context, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So I think, yeah, there are different use cases, right? Because if there is a if it's being deployed in the context of routine care and the nurse is maybe not prescribing, or maybe they are or introducing the chatbot, there's some level of pre-warning or education of what to expect, and there's someone that they can reach out to. There's the other scenario where people are finding stuff on their own and using it. You know, I think in the context of a study, you're kind of obliged by rolling it out safely and have all these precautions. But I guess that's a small percentage of all the usage of AI, right? But things that we develop in the context of our work at DCI Network for this evaluation of app, could be used by other studies and may be publicly available, right? Through iterative refinement, and so that could be a public good, and that itself, it is quite a bit of work to do well, and could be a grant in itself. And these days, I don't know who's going to fund what, and there's some really scary stuff coming out of at least NIH. They paused funding, and some other, but they're not the only agency, and there's other philanthropic groups, right? So we can look beyond whichever agencies are in distress and find other ones. And there's international groups as well, and there's philanthropy, and there might be private sector people that can join DCI Network. And how much we do in this working group will depend on how many funds we raise and how many members. So the more members, so there's a fairly long list, which I'll show you. I emailed just before the meeting. I can give you the high level overview. We're not making any decisions today. I just want to sort of introduce those topics. But I think over the next 2 to 3 months, we need to flesh out all the options of what we have possibly to do and prioritize them and see how much time we want. But I think, Isaac, for your project, is the educational material being developed, or is it still being is it going to be handled just one-on-one verbal discussion to introduce it to patients?
Yeah, for now, it's just going to be one-on-one. I mean, we're, as you recall, at the very early stages, so it's just a traditional feasibility kind of usability assessment to see how do you feel about this as it's interacting with you? Do you feel uncomfortable? How is it responding to your emotions properly? That kind of thing. So it'll be just through the research assistant that we're going to introduce the chatbot. But I think in terms of deployment, if we are to deploy it in the population that population health management is hoping we will deploy it in, then there is a liaison that actually works for the division.
Okay. So that liaison, maybe if you can touch base with them to see if they have an interest in doing something, collaboratively with other people. And then it'd be interesting if we could find someone who's already doing this to come to the conference, say what their lessons learned were. So if you see someone like that, let me know. Steve Lapkoff, as you know, within our network, I had a meeting with him last night, and he said that there was somebody who at AHRQ or the Agency for Healthcare Research and Quality, who actually wanted to fund this kind of work. And sadly, the agency has been eliminated. But she has a lot of ideas on this topic, and I've reached out to her, and we can see. But I think between like short term in the next 3 weeks, we need to decide if we want to do a panel on this topic or not. So think about it if you feel strongly we should. Let me know your ideas for what the focus is and who we could invite. And if not, then we can keep thinking about it, and this fall see if we do put that on the agenda going forward.
There's actually somebody, I'm trying to remember her name. That's why I keep looking away because I have a second screen. I'm trying to find, oh gosh, she works at Google. She used to work in David Bates's division before she transitioned over to industry. We had a meeting about sort of different use cases of chatbots, and I know that they're working on something. Obviously, I don't think she can give too much detail, but at least I think she would be an interesting speaker.
And who does she work for now?
She works for Google now.
Yeah.
Yeah. If I find the name, I will find the name. I just can't find her on my calendar. I'll email everyone so that way you can reach out to her if she's interested, or if you feel like she'd be a good speaker.
Okay. Sounds good. Okay. So let's put that on the table. Maybe we'll give an update on testing. It's going, we can't tell you the results of the test because we're still undergoing, but we are recruiting people. We're doing the observational tests. I think they're going well. I mean, people are able to log on, they're using it, the app, and asking questions of the app, and then doing the survey feedback. So Ava's been, we've got, so she can give you the numbers. We've got an awful lot of, we had to go through the doctors, which sort of delayed us in part. That we had to, the IRB asked us first to get permission of all the doctors, but they're on board, they're enthusiastic, they're giving us tons of names. And so Ava can update you on the numbers, but there's, we're getting great cooperation from the breast cancer medical team. And, kudos to Ava. She's been, there's been no incidents, and I think it's going well. So Ava, you want to give impressions on that?
So basically we're recruiting breast cancer patients from Dana-Farber right now, and the doctors will give the cancer clinical trials team names of patients who they think would be interested in the study, and they give us permission to contact them. So we've contacted around 80 something patients to recruit, and so far we've had a few participants already. No major issues when they're using the chatbot. It seems like they're able to get the hang of using it and asking questions, so that's always a good thing. And we're like, apart from observing how they're using the chatbot, we're also collecting health literacy levels of the patients, and then we get some quantitative and qualitative feedback after they use the chatbot. And so far, all participants have submitted their feedback, and we have a few more scheduled. So all in all, everything's going pretty well so far.
Yeah. So just correct, the IRB was approved by Dana-Farber because they have the ethics review board for all the cancer centers in the Harvard ecosystem, but the patients themselves are Beth Israel patients from our unit. Now, soon that'll be changing because we're building a new cancer center with Dana-Farber, and we're in the process of integrating our clinical services with them. It's going to happen over the next 3 years, but it's moving quite quickly. So it's probably going to start, well before the building opens. and it's pretty complicated to merge two large operations. So there's a lot of work going on in there. But right now, the breast cancer unit that we've been dealing is at BI, which is separate from the Dana-Farber group. But and then in the future, I won't say exactly when because I don't know when. In the future, this will be one department, and they're in the process of doing that. But so I think we'll be able to scale even more in the future. But I think 80 patients plus is quite a large number of things. And so these are doctors who have talked to actually their patients. Their patients have said they want to be contacted for this, and Ava's been calling them and scheduling them. And not every patient will actually be able to do it. Sometimes either for health reasons or they go on vacation, and but it's quite a scheduling chore that Ava's doing a really good job of sort of reaching out, and we're getting almost every day we're doing a test on that. So we should be collecting the data probably for a few more weeks, and then in August we'll synthesize and bring back to the group. But yeah, I think it's interesting. The assessment of the health literacy is based on the Pfizer health literacy scale. They look at a label for ice cream label, and they're asked 5 questions. They have to do a bit of math to sort of figure out, in some questions, how many calories is this, and if I have 2 servings, and so you're able to see the differences in literacy, because some people can go through those 5 questions really quickly, and other people either have trouble understanding the question because the last few questions are longer, or they have trouble, with the math. And that's expected, that there's going to be a range, but there's also sort of a range of technical literacy. And just because they have to sort of share their screen and navigate between screen to screen, sometimes you have to. So one person wanted to know how many questions they had already asked, and you have to then just scroll up and count, but then you have to find the scroller, right, on the side. And so some people can navigate the stuff really quickly, and others struggle with that. And everyone's been able to find it and complete it. But you can see the technical literacy levels. We're not testing for technical literacy level. And one person said, "Oh, it's a web-based app. I thought it was going to be a mobile-based app," which it can be in the future. We're doing it out of convenience to do it. The web is faster. But the mobile app will require its own set of technical literacy, because you're going to have to go to the App Store. First of all, we're going to have to get it onto the App Store. There's a way of putting it on before the App Store, which is sort of a testing environment, but they still have to then go to our testing environment and download. The download is a little more tedious, so we use something called TestFlight. And I didn't want to do that because last time we did it through TestFlight, some people had problems downloading the whole thing. So we did it through a web-based app. But then the phone has some other interesting properties, right? Because you have less screen size than the web. So at least in this case, because it's a larger screen, we're not dealing with the download issue, or and I thought it'd be a lot easier, right, to do on the web, but one person sort of had to look for the scrolling button. So I don't know, Catherine, the scrolling page on the chatbot, that's a normal scroll bar, right? There's nothing different about the scroll bar in that window, right? It's browser dependent.
You mean just to scroll down the page?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's just the normal one.
Yeah. So, but okay, so that's going well. Okay, so the next thing I wanted to sort of share, I emailed everybody a report that sort of describes where we are so far up to now across all the working groups, not just this one, but you can be able to see what we're doing in the AI group and what we're doing in the longitudinal database group. And the connection between the groups is that as this chatbot evolves into a system that can track that it potentially could help you track your medications and your symptoms and answer questions about symptom management. And Isaac, this is sort of one of the big reasons I'm really interested. Apart from you're doing great work, but I think the synergy is that the app itself could become a tool that can help people with symptom management, and that could be used in end of life care as well, right? And so part of the medication label describes side effects. And so we haven't fully explored questions that people have about those symptoms and how to manage them, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's something that we could expand onto this, right? And so if it says may cause higher blood pressure, right? At what point should people be concerned and reach out to their doctor, right? They ask. And so there's kind of a fine line between educating people and prescribing care. And so we're going to have, improve the guardrails, but I think we can also start adding more information to explain what each of the symptoms mean, like, nausea and high blood pressure. Like, there are different levels of high and there's certain levels that, are recognized that are dangerous that you should contact your physician, and there's certain critically high levels that you should probably go to the emergency room, and so maybe we can start finding some of that additional information to add to the chatbot and verify that it's an accurate source and things like that. So long term, this chatbot could be used to help answer questions about symptoms and then proactively ask people about their symptoms. And then that can go into the longitudinal database, which is the other working group. So then they'll be able to, all their conversations with the chatbot and all the symptoms can go into a database. And Catherine, one of the reasons I wanted to connect you and Maria, thanks for joining as well. Maria has helped with our interface, and Tien has been at all our conferences as well as, that we are recording the transcripts, but we could take those transcripts, make them accessible to user between sessions, right? And we'll have to figure out a way for the chatbot to have memory. So if you start a session to know the previous session, which means we'll need a much bigger context window. And each month they're giving more context windows. But then that can go into a database and people could visualize their projection, their cancer journey and how their symptoms, when was the last time I had?
Yeah, basically has memory right now, but it's limited to only the session. Like right now, the transcripts that we saved are just informational for us. So the only memory that it has is just the absolute session, the current session that they're on. So when they start it, and then any previous, any subsequent conversations that they make in that session will be part of it. But we haven't actually, used that to kind of pull in the actual transcript. That's just for us for now, but
Yeah. So So
just for now, but yeah.
yeah. So I think we need to start looking at how to make this a multi-session chatbot to be able to link to the previous session and have it. We'll have to see what the limit is within the context window, but this is sort of a. I think if we want prolonged usage of the chatbot, I don't think people want to re-explain everything they've said before, right? So I think from a user experience point of view, it'd be pretty annoying to have to tell your whole story again. You probably wouldn't use the chatbot.
I also think from a data perspective, it'd be interesting to see if patients are like repeating the same questions over and over again, or is it about the same medication that they keep coming back to ask about? That's just my
Yeah.
having managed multiple medications, I feel like I ask the same questions over and over again sometimes, so.
That's a good point. So maybe we're going to need to start linking the chatbot to Lumina sooner than later so that it has that memory. And then the transcript. So I think by January 2026, when we get the version 3 of this app, I think we'll need to have a way to have multi-session. So Catherine, if you can keep your eye out, and Maria as well, for multi-session architectures. I thought I saw some of the LLMs. It's starting to introduce that and have more bandwidth. Eric Schmidt, who is the former Google chairman, said that at some point this will be a non-issue, that the context windows are going to be huge. So, but I think if we could at least start going down that path and linking it to the database. So there's a lot of work going on in Working Group 1 now to build the architecture for the longitudinal database. So we will have a database by the end of the year. And so for version 3, I think we can connect the app. And Isaac, we want to sort of make these standards publishable and open so that multiple hospitals can run the same architecture. So our hope is to engage with you, and things we build can support your chatbot as well. We can learn from you and vice versa.
Yeah, no, that's a great transition, Dr. Quintana, because I was wondering.
Call me Yuri.
Oh, Yuri. Okay. So, Yuri, I think at another meeting, it would be wonderful to be able to see like what Empathica can currently do. Like if you can, do you have a prototype that you could demo just so I have a sense of like what it's able to do?
Yeah. Yeah, let's arrange a time to give you access to it.
Yeah.
And, you have to have an email address we can use. If it's okay, we'll use your BI email. We'll add it to the system. And then we can schedule a time. So Ava, if you can maybe find a time that works for him, you and I, and we can demo the system and answer your questions, and you can get a live demo.
Yeah, the reason why I'm thinking about this is because I'm actually going to meet with a program officer for what's it called, the A2 pilot grant, and it's specifically focused on AI applications for geriatrics. And we've made it to like the second round. Before they just said, we've chosen other projects because they have greater priority, but they do like my chatbot idea. And initially, we were trying to leverage MGB's GPT 4.0 chatbot that's through Azure to stand up a chatbot. But looking at sort of how you've described your work thus far, it seems like the infrastructure already exists for Empathica. And there is, I think, maybe a potential collaboration that I can imagine to use your chatbot to do what it is that I'm hoping to do with serious illness conversations, especially since you're really focused on just empathy and evaluations of empathy. So I just thought I would throw that out there and see how you felt about that.
Great. It'd be great. No, we'd love that. We'd love to do that. So,
Oh, go ahead, please.
oh, no, yeah, go ahead. I've got one more thing on the future development. But you have another question or comment? Go ahead.
Yeah, too. So I just entered in the chat about Lisa Lehman, who is the person at Verily whom I mentioned to you briefly earlier in this conversation. And then the third thing is, have you met with Mike Hassett at all, the Chief Quality Officer at Dana-Farber?
No.
I can introduce you to, especially since the merger is going to happen relatively in short order. So Mike Hassett is the Chief Quality Officer. He's focused, like his whole focus research-wise is ePro implementation and specifically eSIM. And I can imagine the chatbot being a very effective tool to increase engagement with ePro completion. And you can even link it with patient education or the initiative that you're thinking about right now. Because we just had an abstract that we submitted to ASCO Quality that got accepted that shows how if you don't think about user engagement, the ePro intervention will fail. Like it just will not lead to the outcomes that you're hoping it will lead to. And so I feel like he would be a great contact for you, and you guys can, I'm sure, come up with different ideas and projects moving forward.
Super. Yeah, no, please make that introduction by email and CC Ava. Happy to meet with him and tell him what we're doing. Yeah, the merger is going to happen a lot soon. I can't say when, but soon, because that hasn't been publicly announced. But they're moving at breakneck speed to sort of, you know, both organizationally make the change, but physically also space and so BI and Dana-Farber are fully committed to making this work and in a big way, and so they're you know rearranging our hospital to sort of move some units to other places so that the physical space is near Dana-Farber. So it's exciting. I thought, we were all thinking, like, gosh, that's a lot of work. Like on day one, open the doors 3 years from now. Everyone was saying, oh, that's a lot of work to be done. But we weren't allowed to actually work on stuff until all the legal things got approved. But everything's been approved, so it's happening. It's great. I don't know if you've seen the picture I posted on the internet. The slide. I don't know if the artist's conception is really going to be as beautiful as that, but it's a really kind of futuristic looking building, and yeah, so I think it'll be great. But all right, so the next thing I want to sort of talk about is sort of we need to start thinking about improvements for the next version of the interface. We'll have the data in about 4 weeks from all these studies, like the observational studies and the feedback from patients. But I think there are some things we know we need to improve already. And so the empathy and literacy training are two things that we need. We have a prompt guardrail that gives some examples of how to adjust for language, but it's pretty short. And so I've asked Pfizer to sort of, if they make available their Clear AI, there's a document that they use for their tool to train it. So I think they're going to put it in the public domain. We can feed it that. There are many other sources of information as well on how to personalize things by language level. And so we'll need a document maybe specific to medications for how to explain things at different levels and give it. So we'll need some people to be working on that to do that. The other example area we need to improve is the personalization. And one of those personalizations is on empathy, right? And what what do we mean by empathy? And we use the rudimentary scoring mechanism. And Ava, you can remind us and how that is. But I'd like to develop a document that gives the LLM training examples of good empathy, like things like what Betsy suggested earlier about framing things with a positive first. I'd like to give it some examples. And then I want to be able to evaluate that both the literacy, adaptation, and the empathy, but we need to train it. So, and then we need to score it. So Ava, for the literacy, we used a whole pile of scales. We'll need to figure out which scales we want to move forward. We probably don't need 20 of them. We probably need maybe 2 or 3 that are the most useful. So we'll get Anne Louise to discuss with us and others which one to use. But for empathy, we used pretty rudimentary approach. But Ava, can you explain how we did the empathy scoring?
So there were 2 assessments that we initially used. One was a scoring system that's actually used between patients and providers that sort of look like they look at what sort of empathy phrasing the provider uses. And then another one is a pretty new scoring system for empathy and human computer interactions. That one sort of works the same, where it actually adapted some of the stuff from the first scale that looks at patients and providers. So it checks if there's any keywords or phrases that have any emotional tone or empathetic tone to them, and then you sort of score it based on how it sounds. So the only thing is that now we need to decide whether we are going to continue scoring those individually. So when I went over the transcripts from the large language models, I was doing it individually and sort of giving it my own score. But again, that's subjective. So we want to know if there's a way to automate that. So for example, giving certain keywords or phrases that have an empathetic tone, and then being able to quantitatively score that. And so it's easier to do it on our end instead of having one person score it. Or even if it would make more sense for, instead of us scoring it, for the actual participants to score it, because I mean, they're the end users anyway, so it makes sense for them to give a score of empathy rather than us, who, like, the people who are delivering it. So those are also some considerations that we have to make for when we're actually scoring for empathy.
If you had the user do the scoring, how complicated is that for them to do?
It could be fairly simple with a feedback, like at the when the answers come back, we could have an icon that says, I don't make this simpler to understand or make it clearer to understand, and then make this more empathetic. Or we have to think of how to word these, but kind of a thumbs down or thumbs down, so it knows that it needs to either lower the literacy level or make the tone more friendly. So I'm not exactly sure, but it could be just a simple, up or down button, and then it would then say, okay, I need to go to my examples where I need to be more empathetic.
Because I would just be curious if in the future state, if we had the user do the evaluation, if we would then find, I don't know, women prefer things worded a certain way, men prefer, like if at some point, I realize this is down in the future, but like that information would then be useful as we're creating new guidelines for the chatbot. But I get concerned when it's always the researcher doing the evaluation versus the user, because I don't know that we would always agree, but that's my 2 cents.
We could do, like, our researcher evaluation would be concurrent with the patient evaluation, like be after we look at the transcript, right, and see whether our scales match up with the way patients are and in which case, if the way we're computing it doesn't match up with the way patients are, then we know our scale isn't useful, right? But I don't know how, this sort of a user interface experience sort of thing is how would we make those icons and what the text would be, and somebody was it. I can't remember who, somebody in the group that suggested make this simpler to understand. I think they used, and I don't know what the empathy one will be. There are different personality types. And I think this is probably where we need to start working with social workers and nurses and at least those that are exceptionally good communicators to see how they frame it. Having been in a hospital for more than I really wanted to over the last year, I've noticed that there are a few exceptional nurses who are able to understand the situation and the personality and adapt and say a few things in very, very kind, uplifting ways, right? And they can tailor that. I wonder if we could find those nurses, and it's almost like building an expert system because they're the experts, right? But they're using visuals and everything, right? The chatbot won't have the benefit. They may have the persona, but they don't have the visuals, right? But Isaac, how do they, in your program, are there ways in which this is trained, that people can be trained to, and patient communication to add empathy or personalized communication? How is that even trainable, the humans? Is there a source for that?
That's funny. I'll send you some, let me just send you this information right now. So there's a program so speaking of Dana-Farber connection, so James Tulsky, he is the chair of palliative care at Dana-Farber. It has his own company called Vital Talk. And the whole purpose of the company is to teach serious illness communication. And part of the skill that they're trying to teach clinicians is how to respond to emotion explicitly or implicitly, and there are sort of techniques to do that. And also, I mean, I think the funny thing is that chatbots, at least the commercially available ones like ChatGPT, they already do these things like naturally, right? Like they literally reflect back what you just typed in, and that's what we're taught to do as clinicians. And also, yes, and also I feel like they do a better job than most clinicians do in general. But there are ways to do that, and we are taught that in palliative care training.
So I wonder if we could start trying to identify some of that content and feed it to the LLM and then see whether it comes back. I don't know where the LLMs got that information, because you're right, some of them do find ways of doing that. But yeah, I'd be really interested in taking a look at some of that. Surely some of that training material that company has are proprietary, but maybe there are public sources and that we can access. That training that company does, do they do it like one-on-one or through online?
So there are examples online that you can access. I think there are YouTube videos. I think some of them are like accessible through like CME, you just have to like log in, for example, and then you can get access to like a module. But in terms of the courses that I've taken, what happens is they teach a group of clinicians at a time, and essentially you pair off and you practice, and you give each other one-on-one feedback, and they kind of instruct you on how to give feedback, and they instruct you on a very specific skill that you're practicing. But there are examples. Another good example would be Ariadne Labs also has that's a little different because that's less about responding to emotion and more about knowing what questions to ask and doing it in a systematic way. And that information is also available online publicly. If you just YouTube, Ariadne Labs serious illness conversations, you'll have some videos that you can use to train these LLMs.
Yeah, I'm actually part of that Ariadne Labs. I haven't gone to a meeting quite some time. But you're right, there is a lot of work from that Ariadne Labs and a tool, Gawande, I guess, even wrote books on a lot of that stuff.
Yeah, so really quickly on that. So Eric Fromme, he's the head research scientist for Serious Illness Conversations. He's my collaborator on the chatbot project that I've presented to your group. And so either way, I would say that they are my collaborators, and also they, I'm sure if you have further, more detailed questions, Eric could provide that information.
Okay, great. So let me share with you sort of a rough outline of the empathy subgroup here. This is what we talked about in previous meetings. I'll circulate this after the meeting. But this is sort of some of the things that this group could do. And part of it is looking at how empathy training is done, looking at the different scoring mechanisms that there are. That meeting that you just said, that training that's done as a group, I wonder if some of that could be recorded and transcribed and then synthesized into training examples for an LLM.
That's actually funny you mentioned that, because I also think Tian has a question, but just really quickly, one thing that I've been wanting to do, but I have not found the right partner to do this, is I want to apply for grant funding to just record a whole bunch of serious illness conversations with trained palliative care clinicians. I know Paul at Dartmouth is working on very similar work, but not in the ALS population, which is kind of like its own thing. But I do think that no one currently has a repository of these types of conversations, except maybe for the folks in Vermont a little bit. But I do think that if you're interested in kind of creating something like that, that would be helpful, I think, to train future chatbots in this way. So
that'd be great. Let's pursue that, because I think we are going to need a way to train our LLM. And I think our main focus here is on medication and symptom management, but there are core principles of that kind of training that could be applied for other domains, serious illness conversations, even clinical trial recruitment, where people have, trust issues and don't want to feel like they're being used as a science experiment and not as a human. And so, working group 1 is focused on clinical trial recruitment, and they want to build a chatbot to help people find clinical trials, but how you frame the answers. And we invited Herman from UMass, who was at our conference as well, to be part of these meetings. For that reason, is that as this chatbot evolves to include clinical trials, you need to do that in an empathetic way, because if you're probably looking for clinical trials, you probably have suffered already quite a bit and have gone through unsuccessful treatments. And so you need to approach people, with empathy. And, people have not complained or observed or noted that a lot of clinical trials don't get their recruitment targets. Over half of them don't get to their recruitment targets. Some are even abandoned and closed because they can't. But I think we're also approaching it in a sort of pretty harsh way. I'm sorry, Tien, you've had your hand up, but I didn't see it. Please go ahead. And next time, just barge in. I'm sorry, I wasn't paying attention. Go ahead.
No, it's okay. When we were talking about like how do we evaluate like empathy, there's actually kind of like a scale I think that we can use for both, like if researchers wants to use it or like patients wants to use it. I mean, it works both way. So there's a paper, it says like measuring perceived empathy in dialogue system, and there's a table that is like empathy scale for human computer communication. And they like evaluate concern, expressiveness, warmth, resonate or acknowledge interlocutor feelings, understand cognitive frameworks, understand feelings, inner experience. And I think that we can utilize this table like to use a scale, and we can do like a scale like from 1 to 10 for the patient to evaluate the chatbot. If that makes sense.
That's great.
Yeah, and I put the link in, but it doesn't appear like a link. But I can send the paper through email later.
Yeah. Can you upload it to the working group? So I want us to start being better at sort of archiving stuff, including starting with us, the minutes and stuff like that. We've uploaded some of them, but not all of them. So Ava's going to help me sort of update the resource folder. And Isaac, we can add you to the group. There's a private group, and maybe Ava, if you could add him. Have you registered on DCI Network, Isaac? Do you have an account on there?
I don't think so, but I can register.
Yeah, so register with that, and then we can
I
add you.
feel like I've seen you, but as a user, but
Maybe. I can't remember.
Yeah,
or maybe it was I saw you as an author, with your bio.
yeah. So we have a resource folder in here,
Mhm.
and so we're gonna put all the recordings, and you can see previous recordings and minutes, and then we have them. We have folders for individual groups. So this will be. So we'll populate this with all the previous minutes, and we'll go. So, all right. So I think we've made quite a bit of progress today on thinking about how to develop training for empathy. Maybe we'll talk about health literacy when we can get Anne Louise to join us, and others from the Pfizer team, because some of them have done quite a bit of work there. But this has been super helpful. Thanks, Isaac, for joining, and look forward to. I know you may have clinic and travel, but just join in when you can, and we'll follow up on some of your great leads. And happy to. We want this to be mutually beneficial to you and your staff, and yeah, we'll be our organizations will be joined at the hip pretty soon.
Yeah.
But no, there's a lot of excitement on this side. People really want to make it work, and especially for the patients, right? There's a lot of I have found a lot of really compassionate doctors at BI, and you know, I'm looking forward to, and Dana Farber, congrats, you guys got top rankings, and BI also had some top rankings on yesterday on US News and World Report, so we'll only be stronger going forward. All right, thank you everyone. Have a great day. Take care. Bye-bye.